the Abscondo podcast. Hi, welcome once again to the Abscondo podcast. This is Mark. This week, I'd like to start by reading one of the teachings from last week. It's called "Escape the Ego to Destroy the Pain Body." Eckhart Tolle refers to the emotional side of ego as the pain body. The pain body is the out-of-control emotional energy that sometimes arises within us during conflict, stress, or times of great fear. It takes over the body and mind and makes us react in ways that we later recognize as insane. I don't know what came over me. That's the pain body. He compares it to a vicious animal within us. Like any life form, as long as it lives, it is fighting for survival. It needs to feed every few days in some, or every few weeks in others. Its food is negative energy and drama. If this doesn't come from an external source, the pain body creates it by starting conflict or by focusing on negative thoughts. As long as the ego is alive, the pain body is alive. The only way to avoid getting drawn into a pain body episode, which threatens to ruin relationships and cause irreversible problems, is to destroy the ego. Eckhart Tolle teaches that present moment awareness and inner body awareness are the best portals into consciousness, the best way to escape the ego and thus eliminate the pain body. While this is effective, I have found an even more effective way to destroy the ego, choosing perfect love. The ego's value system is based on separation and fear. Love is union, the opposite of separation, and the antidote to fear. If we condition ourselves to always align with the values of love, to always choose the loving response, then the ego cannot survive, and nor can the pain body. More on this in future teachings. This is what I practice, and I don't recall having a pain body episode for several years now. We continue tomorrow and each day after that. So I wanted to start with that post, because it really summarizes something that I really respect Eckhart Tolle as probably the greatest spiritual teacher alive today. And I actually came to know Eckhart Tolle. I knew of him vaguely, but I came to know of his teachings, and I read The Power of Now and New Earth after I had sort of made my my shift to consciousness. And what really started it for me were writers like Don Miguel Ruiz, and especially when I got into Course in Miracles. And I think I heard of Course in Miracles from Tony Robbins' books, and I started reading it, and there was this whole idea of love versus fear. And now Course in Miracles it's not that easy to get into, especially if you weren't raised in a Christian environment and upbringing, because it uses language having to do with Jesus and Christianity. But it's really a sort of a New Age teaching that aligns with I guess with other religions and spiritual philosophies, but it's told in the language of Christianity or something like that. And what I think what struck me is this idea that love is opposite of fear. And I think, like anyone, I had a lot of fear in my life. I was always worried, especially in the gig economy, as we go off and do our own thing in the world. And there's a lot of uncertainty with being self-employed, and for me, living as an expat, just a very, very unstable way to live, I guess I would say. And so a lot of times I would wake up in the night and have a lot of fear just about general things happening or what could happen in the future or things like this. And of course, I recently went through the end of my 22-year marriage as well. So there was a lot going on in my life when I read Course in Miracles. And for me, this idea that love is the opposite of fear, right? Because I would think, you'd think that hate is the opposite of love or something, but it really isn't. Everything, all the ego's emotions, which include things like hatred and anger and jealousy and rage and resentment and all these negative emotions, they all flow from fear. And when you can truly look into your heart and learn self-love, they call it self-love, but really that's the source of love. It comes from within. And I was going through a time, and this is about, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago, about 3 years ago, and I was kind of alone, and I had time to just kind of lay in my bed and read some books and think and look at the ceiling. And I would even say I was a bit depressed, but that was okay because I was able to really go within. There was no temptation to look to a person to basically entertain me or make me feel loved. I had to find this from within, or else I was in agony. And thanks to these books and just that time alone, I was actually able to focus on the inner body. I would say, and focus on the heart, and realize this kind of cliche truth that you have to learn to love yourself. You don't need a perfect partner or spouse to give you love. That love comes from within. And in fact, if you don't find that love within, you're really never going to be able to get it from someone else, because then you're like two sick people who don't know that they are loved, don't know that love comes from within, looking for love from each other. And if both of you are doing that, or even one of you is doing this in a relationship, it becomes a very needy, clingy relationship. There's a lot of jealousy, a lot of resentment, a lot of expectations that don't get met. And for a while, it can make you happy. It's a huge distraction from your inner world and your reality. But then after a while, you're with someone and you live together and you try to start a life together. And if you haven't learned to love yourself, you're going to go through, again, what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body episodes. And this is a really interesting concept, because really the pain body is of the ego, but he separates the idea of a pain body from just the general idea of ego. The pain body is when sometimes people refer to, what do they call them, narcissists or toxic people, which I hate those terms, because really all we're talking about is a person going through a pain body episode. And I think we all know what that means. I think that we've all been there, probably. We've all had rage. We've all been out of control in a relationship, especially. The ones we claim to love most are the ones we attack. And we don't know why. We just get upset and we can't stop ourselves from saying things we don't mean and doing things we don't mean that we have to apologize for later. But you're so overtaken by this thing. And this also happens with, with crimes. People commit crimes under the influence of the pain body, and then they go to court, and the lawyer's like, this is uncharacteristic of this person. They've never acted out like this before. What came over this person? Well, the pain body did. And unfortunately, in our society, because we believe in guilt, which I'll get into later, that guilt isn't even real. Guilt is, any error or sin, any mistake, any crime is just an error that can be corrected. But because we believe in this idea of guilt, we hold people accountable for their pain body episodes. What we should be doing is teaching them about the pain body. So the pain body, literally, it's like a parasite that lives within us as long as the ego is alive with us. Now, how do we know the ego is alive within us? Well, the ego does certain specific things. It wants to be better than other people. It wants to compare. It wants to be right. It wants to judge. It wants to get, not give. It wants to condemn and to punish people for wrong. It wants to play victim. It wants to defend itself. And it wants to get in between you and all your relationships. It wants to manage relationships. And that's really unfortunate, because the only way to have a real relationship is to do so without the ego. I'll get into that during this episode. So as long as you still have an ego, and people think that it's necessary to have an ego, but I found that it's possible to destroy the ego completely, basically live without the ego, or at least be so conscious that you're aware of egoic thoughts and you don't take them seriously. You can even laugh at them or just ignore them. That's what I do. I'm not saying that I don't have negative thoughts. I just don't take them seriously. That's just my brain doing its normal mind things. But when you give it a name, the ego, or give it a name, the pain body, you can recognize that this entity is not truly you. People say, I can't stand myself anymore. I can't stand to be with myself. Who's the I and who's the myself? The I is your true identity of consciousness, love. I am. The state of being, the observer of the mind, the observer of the body, the observer of reality. So you are not the mind. The mind, unaware of this, becomes what's called an ego, a mind that does not know that the identity is not in the mind. The identity is spirit. If the mind isn't corrected by spirit, then the mind goes out of control and becomes insane. And this is where the ego comes, and the constant arguing, the constant conflict, the idea that the world's out to get you, The idea there's good and bad things happening, and you're trying to resist things that are happening or fight for other things to happen, and that you're going to find salvation in the external world. You're going to get your way. You're going to finally have enough money and finally have that position and finally find that perfect person, finally have the perfect car. And when all this happens, you're going to be finally happy. And of course, that never comes because you're always looking for happiness in the future. And you're always finding reasons why you're not quite there yet. So that's the ego. And it's not necessary to live within the ego. You're going to have those thoughts still, but you don't have to take them seriously. And so in my relationship, my partner Zuzana and I, we've come to understand that it's possible to have a relationship without any ego. We have no conflict, no negative emotions, no resentment, no jealousy at all. And the way we've done that is we've just completely destroyed our egos. It's a joke. Those thoughts, it's not real. What is real is love. I would even say that the energy of life itself, when you go inside your inner body, go imagine how you feel. Feel the energy coming within your inner body, your hands and your chest and your stomach. And that energy is the feeling of love. You don't have to get the energy from somewhere else. It flows from you. But it only flows from you as long as you are open, as long as you have a wide open heart and an open mind. I mean, entirely open to anyone, to everyone, to the world, to everything happening, no good or bad, acceptance of everything. And when you get to that point, that love, that energy grows. And then you learn what love is. And we don't learn what love is. We don't have a love class in school. Our parents may not have understood perfect love in a spiritual sense. So the word love has come to mean, unfortunately, like the word God and like other things, it doesn't really mean what it's supposed to mean. The way people use love is this idea of needy clinging to someone else. And so we get into relationships, we have these rules, we set rules on each other. Don't you dare do this, I get jealous, it bothers me if you do this, you have to clean, you have to be helping me half the time, you're not doing enough around the house, you're not making enough money, you're gaining weight, whatever it is, you drink too much, whatever it may be, we start to control other people because what we consider love is this needy clinging. And we're afraid that if we lose that person, we lose love. So that's not love. Right? That's ego. That's ego. That's an egoic relationship. And it's very difficult to take an egoic relationship, which is probably 99% of all relationships that people have in the world, and turn it into a love relationship because you're changing so much of the fundamentals, and you actually risk losing that relationship if both people don't come along. But it's worth doing because to not is to remain in this state of fear, in this state of up and down constantly. And there are going to be pain body episodes, and they're painful, not just when they're happening, but sometimes, when you have a terrible fight and say things you don't mean, you cause so much damage that even 3 days, it always took me about 3 days to recover from a huge fight, just emotionally. And I say recover, but I probably wasn't even recovered then, really. I remember when I recovered from that way of doing relationships. And it was the day that I forgave myself for all that I thought that I had done wrong for 22 years, for all that I thought that was wrong with me. When I went inside my heart and felt the love of myself, and I realized there's nothing wrong with me. And from that moment, I was able to, as long as I continued to touch some kind of spiritual teaching every single day, which I do, and that's really one of the reasons why I write these posts, and I hope that you can read them from my blog at abscondo.com or on Instagram or on the I Am mobile app, the I Am by Info Being mobile app. I post these posts because I think everyone should have some kind of contact with some spiritual ideas. I'm not saying that my ideas are right, but I'm writing from the place of my truth, and I think if there is any truth in these teachings, it's going to resonate with you because on the level of spirit, we're exactly the same. In love, we're exactly the same. Every single person loves the same way and feels love the same way. And we all know what love is. So while Eckhart Tolle talks about present moment awareness and the inner body as a portal into the now, as a portal into consciousness and salvation, I think that that's true, but I also think that love is perhaps even a stronger, more effective portal into consciousness, which means escape from the ego. And I wrote a book about this called Beloved, How to End Pain by Escaping Your Ego. It's an ebook on Amazon and on Kindle. And once I sort of adopted the values of love and conditioned my mind, and again, the ego is a conditioned mind. So the world conditions our minds to have the values of ego. We learn this in school. We learn this from the media. We learn this from parents and from friends. The ego is a learned, conditioned state that a mind gets into. You can recondition your mind. You can undo the damage of ego. And you can learn to teach the mind the loving response. The loving response is total acceptance of everyone, unconditional acceptance no matter what, eternal love, unconditional eternal love, never blaming, shaming, judging, making anyone guilty. Any kind of attack or any kind of a negative thing that comes to you is a cry for help. It's everything is either a loving act or a cry for love. So the loving response is to try to find a way to be loving in response. And sometimes that's enough just to be quiet and just to be observing. Another thing that love does is it's not trying to get, it's trying to always give. Love is the most generous, creative energy. So everything that we do in love, if we're going to create art, it's going to be beautiful. If we're going to create a product, it's going to be wonderful and improve lives. If we're going to try to serve someone or help someone, it's going to actually work if we're doing it in love. If you're doing it from ego to accomplish something or to try to be great and get recognition from people, what's going to happen is you're going to be up and down. You're going to be starting and stopping and then giving up and then trying again because the ego needs that external gratification. Whereas love doesn't need any gratification. Love comes from within once you know what love is. Love is not jealous or possessive. Love is completely honest and open. I mean, radically honest and open, radically accepting. There's just no conflict. And that's the source of strength. When people can join together in harmony, what they're doing is they're removing the mind from getting in the way. And the ego always wants to get in the way of relationships, which is ironic because the ego is what? The ego's range of behavior is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. So your range is you're going to be suspicious of everybody or vicious and mean and attacking them. And that's the entity that you want, this parasite within, to control your relationships. No wonder you're going to end up with pain body episodes and conflict. And you're going to call someone toxic. And you're going to remove contact. You're going to walk away. That's what's happening. We need to understand what is happening. We're making the mind real. We're making past and future real. We're making thought real as who you are. And then from that perspective, we are judging and condemning other people, calling them sinners, and constantly doing this. And people do this as a normal way of doing relationships. It doesn't work. So I've been talking a lot this week. I'm really excited these days. And one of the reasons is because finally, after 17 years of my life, I finally have this I Am by InfoBeing mobile app out there, and we're starting a community, a loving community of people who serve each other. So whatever you're trying to do, just download I Am on Android or iOS. Just create an I Am statement in the app saying what you want to do. You're trying to expand your business. You're trying to reach new customers. You're trying to start a life coaching thing or whatever. And someone like me is going to come along, and I'm going to see that statement. We're going to match, and I'm going to help you. And then you're going to help me, and you're going to help other people. And we're going to help each other. We're going to join together in true union, which is on the level of spirit and love. And that's what we're doing. And we're starting this massive movement. It's not just an app, it's a movement of service to each other, of treating people right, of living our dreams and growing in consciousness. So I'm super excited, and forgive I know I was talking a little bit faster than usual today. I guess I just got done with my yoga right now, and I was still kind of out of breath when I started. But I'll probably leave it at that. I'll leave you with a song. An Abscondo song. I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to next week. In the meantime, just please join I Am by InfoBeing. And if I see you there, I'll say hi. And if you create a statement about what you're doing, I'll try to help you the best I can. Take care.
On an August night when we were 17, You stood and cried, I had to set you free. I had my life and what I wanted to be. Felt I was right, I know you disagree with me. It just rains all the time. Winter's long, the summer's not so fun. I'm still dreaming, we still got time. Love is on our side. Love is on our side. On a stormy night when we were 29, it's been half my life still wishing you were mine. Girl, I still loved you when it passed on by. Big blue house with a little girl inside. It just rains all the time. Winter's long, the summer's not so fun. I'm still dreaming, we still got time. Love is on our side. Don't you think that you could be with me? Remember how it used to be. You still think I could come to your blue house and take you out on? Did those tears in your eyes that final night ever change sense? It just rains all the time. Winter's long, the summer's not so fun. I'm still dreaming, while we still got time. It just rains all the time. Winter's long, the summer's not so fun. I'm still dreaming, we still got time. On an August night when we were 17, you stood and cried, I had to set you free.